Have you ever met someone who seemed completely convinced they were the smartest person in every room? Someone who could turn every conversation back to themselves. Someone who needed admiration the way most people need oxygen. At first, they can be fascinating, confident, charismatic, larger than life. People gather around them, listen to them, follow them. But over time, something begins to feel off. The confidence starts looking like arrogance. The charm starts looking like manipulation. And the attention they once attracted starts becoming the very thing they demand. For thousands of years, humans have been trying to understand this kind of person. Long before psychology existed, long before personality tests, long before social media gave everyone a personal audience, the ancient Greeks told a story. And strangely enough, that story may still explain more about human behavior than we like to admit. The story begins with a young man named Narcissus. According to the myth, he was extraordinarily beautiful. People admired him wherever he went. They fell in love with him, desired him, pursued him. But Narcissus rejected everyone. Nothing seemed good enough. No person seemed worthy enough. Then one day he looked into a pool of water. For the first time he saw his own reflection, and he became captivated. He stared, and stared, and stared. He couldn't leave, couldn't look away, couldn't stop admiring the image staring back at him. Eventually, according to the legend, Narcissus died beside the water, consumed by his obsession with himself. The story is dramatic, tragic, almost ridiculous, and yet it has survived for over 2,000 years. Why? Because somewhere deep down, humans recognize the truth hiding inside it. Not everyone becomes obsessed with their reflection, but many people become obsessed with themselves, and that obsession can quietly shape entire lives. Today, when people hear the word narcissist, they usually imagine someone vain, someone who posts too many selfies, someone who talks about themselves nonstop, someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. But psychologists define narcissism much more carefully. At its core, narcissism is an inflated sense of self-importance, a belief that you are somehow more special, more deserving, more significant than other people. And here's what makes narcissism so fascinating. It doesn't always look the way people expect. In fact, some narcissists don't seem confident at all. Some don't seem powerful. Some don't even seem particularly social. Because narcissism actually has two very different faces, and understanding the difference changes everything. The first face is what most people recognize immediately: grandiose narcissism. These are the individuals who seem larger than life. They're often charismatic, outgoing, dominant. They walk into a room expecting to be noticed, and usually they are. Grandiose narcissists love admiration, love recognition, love status. Power attracts them, prestige attracts them, visibility attracts them. Not necessarily because they want to help people, not necessarily because they want to accomplish something meaningful, but because those positions provide something they crave: attention. Imagine a spotlight. Most people enjoy stepping into it occasionally. Grandiose narcissists want to live under it. They want the spotlight to follow them everywhere. And when it doesn't, they often become frustrated, resentful, even angry. What's fascinating is that grandiose narcissists can be extremely successful for a while. Studies consistently show that narcissistic individuals often make strong first impressions. They appear confident, competent, certain. And human beings are remarkably vulnerable to certainty. If one person speaks calmly while another speaks confidently, most people trust confidence, even when confidence is wrong. This helps explain why narcissistic individuals sometimes rise quickly in business, politics, entertainment, leadership positions. People assume confidence equals competence, but confidence and competence are not the same thing. Sometimes they're barely related at all, and eventually reality starts demanding proof. That's where the problems begin, because narcissism thrives on appearance, reality thrives on results, and sooner or later those two collide. But grandiose narcissism isn't the only form. The second face is much harder to spot: vulnerable narcissism. This version surprises people, because vulnerable narcissists don't always look arrogant. They don't always dominate conversations. They don't always seek center stage. Sometimes they're quiet, reserved, sensitive, even shy, which makes them seem like the exact opposite of narcissists. But underneath, something similar is happening. The sense of specialness remains. The sense of entitlement remains. The belief that they deserve exceptional treatment remains. The difference is that vulnerable narcissists constantly feel threatened. They desperately want validation, but they fear rejection. They crave admiration, but they expect criticism. As a result, they often become trapped in a cycle of insecurity and resentment. A casual comment feels like an attack. A small criticism feels like humiliation. A minor disappointment feels deeply personal. They experience the world as if everyone is constantly overlooking the greatness they deserve to see, and that makes life exhausting, for them and for everyone around them. What's particularly interesting is that both forms of narcissism are trying to solve the same psychological problem. They just use different strategies. Grandiose narcissists solve insecurity by convincing themselves they're superior. Vulnerable narcissists solve insecurity by constantly searching for proof that they're being undervalued. Different methods, same hunger. Both depend heavily on external validation, and that's where the danger begins. Because when your self-worth depends on constant admiration, life becomes a never-ending search for mirrors. Every interaction becomes a test. Every conversation becomes an evaluation. Every criticism becomes a threat. And every compliment becomes temporary relief. One of the biggest misconceptions about narcissism is that narcissists love themselves. Many psychologists argue the opposite. Underneath the grandiosity, there is often profound fragility. Think of narcissism less as self-love and more as self-protection. A psychological fortress, a defense mechanism built to shield a vulnerable self-image. The arrogance, the entitlement, the constant need for admiration, all of it may be functioning like armor, and armor only exists when something underneath feels threatened. This helps explain one of the strangest characteristics of narcissistic individuals. They often appear incredibly confident, yet react dramatically to criticism. A secure person can hear negative feedback and evaluate it. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but their identity remains intact. For a narcissist, criticism feels different. It feels dangerous, because criticism threatens the image they've worked so hard to maintain. And when that image cracks, anger often rushes in to protect it. Researchers sometimes call this narcissistic injury, a wound to the ego, and the response can be surprisingly intense. The criticism might be small, but the reaction isn't, because the argument isn't really about the criticism itself. It's about protecting a fragile internal story, a story that says, I am exceptional, I am superior, I am special. The bigger the story becomes, the harder it is to defend, and eventually life begins testing it from every direction. Relationships, careers, friendships, failure, aging, competition. Reality doesn't care about our stories. Reality only cares about what's true, and that's why narcissism often becomes increasingly difficult to maintain over time. The strange tragedy of narcissism is that it often rewards people in the beginning and punishes them later. Confidence attracts people, but entitlement pushes them away. Charm creates opportunities, but selfishness destroys trust. Admiration creates relationships, but lack of empathy eventually damages them. It's like building a house on unstable ground. At first, everything looks impressive. Then tiny cracks appear, then larger ones, and eventually the structure begins collapsing under its own weight. Because human relationships require something narcissism struggles to provide: genuine mutuality, the ability to care about another person as much as yourself. And that's where our story becomes even more interesting, because narcissism isn't just about confidence, it isn't just about vanity, it's deeply connected to empathy, or more accurately,